I'm glad we're doing the financial aid talking points.
I was going to ask about that because
I didn't know I was in financial aid.
For Friday, August 17th at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's nice.
Yeah.
Neumont Live. Neumont Live. All right, well, let's get this thing started. Thank you for joining us. Neumont Live. My name's Jason, of course, and this is my guest, Ray.
Yes, hello.
Mr. Ray Maple. Ray Maple is the department chair for a Bachelor's of Science in Software and Game Development.
Yes.
And Ray has graciously decided to join us today, and of course, take some time to answer questions, tell us about the program himself, and of course, what you guys can expect when you get here this fall. So let's start with that. Like I said, my name's Jason. I've been here for several years now in the admissions department. Influential, and well, I like to think influential in helping students come to school. I love it. It's a lot of fun for me to see students come and experience what Neumont has to offer. But then also, metaphorically pass the baton over to our instructors like Ray and see where they go from there. So tell us about yourself, Ray, who you are, what you do, and we can jump into it.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Ray Maple. I'm the chair of the Software and Game Development degree here at program. I've been programming games for the last 20 years. I've worked at some smaller companies like WayForward Technologies. We did Shantae, Contra, a lot of handheld systems. And then I worked at Disney for about 10 years, worked on Toy Story, Cars, for the Xbox, the PlayStation, then worked on Infinity 1, 2, and 3. So I worked there for about 10 years, and then I started a startup company called Cast AR, and we did augmented reality stuff, but that didn't start up. The startup did not start up, and I got a call from Neumont saying, hey, would you be interested in teaching my knowledge, all the skills and the things I've acquired over the 20 years? And I said, let me try, and I had an interview, and they liked what they saw, and here I am.
Awesome. Well, I think in an industry like this, we experience a lot of startups. And I think that's one of the nice things about technology is it gives students a chance to really see what's out there and maybe take opportunities they didn't plan on initially, but might be a good fit for them. And I want to kind of go back to what we talked about and what you had mentioned briefly. You had kind of given us a very quick overview of some of the places you had been.
Yeah.
But can you describe in a little more detail maybe some of the places you've worked for, but maybe some of the responsibilities you had there?
Okay,
and what you were influential in doing?
Yeah. So I'm predominantly a gameplay programmer. So I'm in charge of doing basically the game logic, right? So programming enemy AI, programming the player characters, and basically I do a lot of making sure that the game is fun, right? There's really the technology people that make sure that we have the tools to do the game, and then there's the people that work more on the game side. So I work more on the game side, making sure that it feels right, that it plays right, that it feels fun. And so I've worked on a lot of small projects where I was like basically the only programmer. This is a time before we called them indies, right? We're just a small game studio. And I did everything. I programmed from the graphics to the sound, the AI, and then I worked on bigger projects where there was 300 people. And so I did a lot of programming for well, like in Infinity, I programmed a lot of the editor, which allowed you to place objects in the world, right? So I've worked on a variety of different types of projects. Like I said, 1-2-man projects to 300-man projects. And but typically I worked on the game side, right? So making sure that it was fun.
Cool. And so it sounds like you bring to the table certainly a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Big and small, big projects, wide scoping projects. Very cool. So transitioning from that level of experience, what was it that got you into teaching or made you want to decide to go into teaching?
Well, I was thinking about this earlier today. I think that what I can offer is something very unique. As I was saying before, I worked on a lot of smaller projects, and those smaller projects I had to do a lot of different types of programming, right? And sometimes we would start off with like no engine, so I'd have to do the graphics systems and all the different systems that that are utilized in a game. And then, like I said, later on, I worked on bigger projects where I worked on like smaller things, but they were huge, projects with thousands of files and millions of lines of code. So what I think I bring is, I bring a lot of experience, right? I teach classes now that teach about game engines. And I'm not coming from the standpoint like, oh, I kind of know about game engines. No, I made game engines, right? And I've worked with big engines. I worked with Unity and Unreal. So I feel like I've seen it all in the industry. I've touched it all. I mean, 20 years of experience from, you go back to, the 90s to now, a time period before even hardware acceleration, before video cards that do 3D acceleration, right, where everything was software done. And I've done everything to it. So what I think I bring for education is I can show these students, how to develop a game from, the ground up, right?
Right on. Right on. And so if you had to say like your favorite part about teaching, I know that was a lot of information to take in, but
yeah.
and kind of the motivations behind leaving industry, coming into teaching, what's your favorite part about teaching? What do you really just love to do?
Well, I love to see that the students grow, right? We start off with basically nothing. And, well, not nothing, but their knowledge of, game systems. And so working with them to see their projects grow from the very beginning, really simplistic games to, a lot more complex games.
Yeah.
And I've seen some really good projects. For me, the concept, the idea is the most important thing. So I've seen from people that not having like really good ideas to creating stuff that's really fun and enjoyable. And, I think, like I said before, that I come from a gameplay area of programming. So the ideas, the creativity, that's what I really look for, the creativity, right? And to see my students become more and more creative and be able to do more and more because they have more ability, right? As they learn more, they can do more. And so they can really, flex their creative muscles.
Right. From my point of view in admissions, that's what I like to see. I like to see where they come from when we get to speak with them, and the beginnings of them getting into school, and then where they end up once you get to work with them,
Yep.
and then they make that transition from school to industry. That's cool to see that evolution. It's super cool.
Yep.
So while students are here, a lot of what they want to know, and of course what I think everybody wants to know, is what's some of the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts stuff that you guys do. What are some of the languages that students are going to learn while they're here, they can plan on learning while they're at Neumont?
Yeah, I think there's languages that are kind of common to, like, they do game development courses, but they also do other software courses, right? And some of those they might do like Java or JavaScript, but in games particularly, we use all the different versions of C. We use C, C++, and C#. Sometimes, we use those languages because it's a part of the engine. Take Unity, for example. Unity uses C# as its scripting language, so we use C# there. But when they first start making their own engines, we use C and C++ because that is the basic language that a lot of these tools and the libraries, the graphics libraries and the physics libraries use C and C++. So for our course, our core language would be those variants of C.
Awesome.
But at Neumont, they will learn other languages because that is part of the curriculum of just software in general.
Okay, and so if a student wanted to get a jump on things before they got here, what are some of the languages that they could dip their toes in before they get here?
I think that the C# language is one of the nicest languages. I think it's the syntax, the keywords are very similar to C and C++, but it's a nicer language where you don't have to deal with memory management and stuff. So it's kind of like the same language, but C and C++, why it's utilized in the industry a lot is because it's a very powerful language. It allows you to access memory and stuff. But at that same time, with great power comes great responsibility. And sometimes you can, really hurt yourself by, you get the reference. You can really hurt yourself in some of the C, C++ stuff, especially when you're dealing with memory management and stuff. So I would say looking at the looking at C# first, and then maybe looking at C and C++.
Cool. So get to know it. Might be something good to check out before you come to school.
Yep.
There's all kinds of tutorial websites and places you can go. So great.
Yep.
Now you had mentioned engines, like using game engines. You had mentioned that you developed some engines yourself.
Yeah.
What are some of the, and I guess I should ask if students are going to use pre-made game engines while they're here.
Yes. So my view is this. Game development is in a different phase than it used to be. Most studios before, they would pride themselves in their own engines, the in-house engines, proprietary engines, right? So they would develop these engines from the ground up. And then they would do a new game, and then they revise that engine, or they would start a new engine. We live in a day and age where we don't want to reinvent the wheel every time, right? So Unity and Unreal are two engines that are very popular. Unity typically for smaller projects or for indie developers. I typically say like Unity is for a studio that's 10 people or less, right? Unreal is typically for AAA, big studios. But my feeling is this: we first learn the kind of the nuts and bolts through C and C++ by developing our own engines, right?
Sure, sure.
But why keep on developing on this simplistic engines when we have other engines that will allow us to do more, right? So we take our C and C++, get us to a certain stage so we understand the technology, and then we just do a big leap, and kind of basically once we know that, we utilize the professional tools to develop things that are more professional looking and give us more ability, right?
Okay, yeah, okay. One of the questions we get asked quite a bit is core classes. Like, I want to be a game developer. I want to, get into that field. What are some of the core classes that I can expect to take that will lead me down that path?
Yes. So what we've done is we've kind of like just analyzed, we don't live in a bubble. We look at all the other schools and to see what they offer, right? There's a certain set of core concepts that game development students go through, right? Which is computer graphics, AI, physics, right? And on top of that, just kind of general purpose, game programming. The flow that we do here is we start with basic, I wouldn't say basic, but introduction to game programming, where we start with C, C++, we make our own game engines, right? So we get a good general idea. And then we go into specialized areas. Then we go like computer graphics, where we use OpenGL, where we do our own creation of shaders. Shaders are basically like a programming language to create computer graphics. Shaders basically describe a way of how to draw an image on the screen, how to light it. And then we go on to like AI, where we develop like what we call like agents, which are like little entities, characters in our games, and we give it intelligence. And so we look at all the different types of ways that we can make our characters intelligent, or our NPCs, non-player characters, intelligent in there. And then we look at physics and like how do we, control characters in the screen? How do we create cloth? Different simulations. And then we do more advanced stuff with the Unreal and the Unity engines also.
Okay. And I should say that the questions that we have today are questions that we get asked quite a bit and that were submitted. But feel free to submit questions as we're chatting. If there's anything that you want to know, let us know, and we can take some time today to talk about that. So one of the questions that we do get asked quite a bit on the front end when we talk to students and potential students is math, right? They hear software development, they hear coding,
yes,
they hear computer science,
yeah,
and they automatically start thinking, oh my gosh, what about math? For good or bad, right?
Yes.
So if you could talk about that. What kind of math skills should someone come prepared with? And if you're not a great math student per se, is that going to be a problem?
Yeah. So I think there's typically two types of game development schools I see offered now. There's the ones that kind of focus on design and art, and there's ones that are more technical, right? And what I'm creating here is kind of something that bridges both, right? Because we have students that are typically technical, right? And then we have students that maybe not as technical, right? That are more creative types. And I want kind of the middle line between both of those, right? And I feel like some people go, oh, I don't know if I could do it because of all the math. Really, in what we do, there's probably a set of 10 operations that we do over and over and over again, right? So it's not like you have to know all the far-reaching sides of like math. And yes, you will take math courses here. I'm not saying that there isn't, but in game programming in general, like a lot of things, there's a certain set that you do a lot. And there's things that you do every once in a while, and if you don't understand that, then you could always look it up. So I'd say don't let that be something that worries you, because I'm not a mathematician. I know what I need to know, and I know the tools when I need to use them. It's kind of knowing what you need to use. And if you don't know exactly, then you can always refresh on that.
Right on. So it's a part of it, but it's not all of it. Part
That's
of the process.
yes. We are a technical school. We are a computer science school. But I just don't want people to be totally worried about that because we will teach you what you need to learn.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, as far as making games, that's one of the things that we do talk to students a lot about is, I want to make a game. That's why I want to go into this degree is I want to make a game. And so do they have that opportunity to do while they're here? Are they going to be making games while they're here?
Yes. You'll be making lots of games. So not my theory, but what I really push here is that if you want to make games, the best way to learn to make games is by making games. So I hold a lot of game of the weeks. I hold a lot of, I give you a theme. Here's a theme. You have 4 days to do it. Come back and after 4 days, and what do we have, right? And they're not going to be perfect. And at the very beginning, they're not going to be very good. But as you work on it and keep on working and progressing, it's going to get better and better. I mean, the best way, and you can find this in any field, of learning something is by actually doing it, right? So for Neumont, our game development program is, I really push people to work on a game, mini games, right? And then what we're trying to do too is build a portfolio of games to show, employers, because there's so many people that say, oh, I got my degree. Well, show me what you have, right? What you have is very important, right? That's how they're going to evaluate you as an employer. Your skills is your portfolio of work that you've done. Not so much, yes, it's great to have a degree. I think that's important. But I think what the school also offers is a way that is very structured to have you develop games and learning games and have a portfolio of good games to show employers.
Right. I hear that a lot from employers. The degree definitely gets your foot in the door, but the skill set, right, is what keeps your foot in the door, right, and allows you to go into the room.
Yes.
And so that's good to hear. I think a lot of our students do come here with a little bit of concern, like, gosh, I love gaming, but when I leave school, can I actually make games? And that's what they want to do, right?
Yes, I think that's what I push the most. For me to succeed, and this is how I feel, is that you will have more enjoyment creating games than you will playing games. There'll be a time when you go, hey, I logged on my computer. I have two options here. And I call them consumers and creators. I can either be a consumer where I consume YouTube and just watch stuff or play games, or I can be a creator. Am I going to use my time to create something, or am I going to use my time to consume something? So I want creators.
Cool, man. Now, of course, the big question is, once I have that degree, once I have that skill set, where do I go from there? And so life after college, what does it look like for these students going into the game development degree? Is it employable? Can they find jobs? Are they out there? What are their prospects?
So realistically, you have different options, right? Some people their plan is, hey, I want to go here, do games, I want to learn about games, but really after that, I want to just develop software. I don't really care what I do, I just want to develop software. So I feel like game programming is probably one of the most technically challenging because you have to program, but you also have to be fast. You have to be optimal. People understand the idea of frame rates. If your game is not fast, then you're going to have a slow frame rate, and people are not going to want to play that. So on top of being challenging in that way, you have to be very optimized, right? So, but some students go, hey, I want to be in the game degree, but I just want to program. That's fine. You're going to learn how to program, and you can get a job anywhere. Another option is some people say, hey, I want to learn to program, and there's the idea of the indie game developer, right? The Stardew Valley, the guy who, single guy made a game in 4 years and now making millions of dollars, right? So there's always the option of being your own developer, right? The third thing, though, is that, and this is why I'm saying about the portfolio, is that I truly believe that if you have a good portfolio, if you can prove to employers that you have the skills to make these things, they want you. The hardest thing is getting through to the resume process, to having them actually evaluate you as an individual, because the resume process now is automated to where they just scan it and look for keywords and what do they see, right? If you can get to the point where you have those skills, then you could prove those skills, you can get somewhere. Though I would say that the way I look at game development is similar to a lot of different arts. If you're a musician, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a writer, and I put game development in there too, if you're those things and you want to do that, you have to kind of pay your dues sometimes. Sometimes it's not going to be, you're going to work at Blizzard or Bungie or one of these places right off the bat. You might have to go to a smaller place, work for a while, get experience. Besides the portfolio, I would say the second or even equally as important thing is to get the experience. And sometimes experience will be at a smaller place or maybe doing something that you're not exactly wanting to do at first, just some programming experience, right? So the different avenues.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that does tend to be a big concern for students, right? What am I going to do after college? Where can I go? What are my options? And it sounds like it really is, yeah, you can definitely get into that field. You might have to start out in something different, obviously techie, of course, but yeah, if that's where you're headed, you could definitely do that. And again, mentioning experience, let's talk a little bit about the experience they get while they're here. I know one of the things that does tend to make Neumont unique is our enterprise project program.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. What's the enterprise projects? What do they look like for software and game development students?
Yeah.
What kind of experience can they get while they're here to prepare them for that life after college with that tangible experience, right?
So there's experience is all about, can you function with others, right? Can you work well with others? Can you, given a set of instructions, can you fulfill these things? Now, I want to talk about two different types. Like one part of the enterprise is just getting the experience of going through the process of working as a professional, right? And that's one thing that are all enterprises, because we have different types of enterprise projects. Some of them aren't game related. Some of them might be to a different field. But it's just as vital that you go through that process, because if you could say, hey, I've gone through this process, I know how to develop as a professional, that's important. Now, the thing that we're doing at Neumont right now, though, is we're really pushing to get more and more game development enterprise projects, right? Actually, currently we have one right now that we're working on with the studio to do. They want to do more web-based stuff. So we're building like their API. So the API being a set of functions that allow you to develop on a particular platform, right? So we're working with a company doing games for web for them. But we have other ones that we're lining up right now. Also, the idea maybe is to do some internal stuff where my goal is to do a Neumont game studio where we develop games in-house and we publish them, whether it be on Steam, whether it be on Google Play, but that we go through the process, because I think that's what takes a student to a professional, is to go through that process. And that's what employers want to see. Have you released something? If you can say that you've released something on a commercial platform, whether it be Steam or anything, that has a lot more clout with them, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. All these things are trying to prepare them, because I've been in the industry for 20 years and I know what they are looking for, right?
Right on. And so the ability to make something, the ability to, like you said, publish something or create something or put something out there.
Yes.
That really is that moment of getting your foot in the door and saying, hey,
yeah,
I've got the skill set, so take me seriously, right?
If someone says, hey, what have you done? We'll say, hey, go check it out, download it over here. And
Right
that's what you can say, besides saying, well, I made a couple things. There's a difference between thoughts and ideas and concrete things, right?
Right on. Well, and kind of going back to some of the options after college, I think a lot of what motivates students to get into a field like this is, of course, being able to do something that they really enjoy. But the other motivation is, how can I make a living at doing something like this, right?
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about, legitimately, what can these students expect to make when they get out of school?
Okay. So one thing I want to bring up before I say about the price or the money, the financial goals, is I hope that people that come into this program do it because that's their passion, right? And sometimes if you were to look at salaries for tech people, right? Game development a lot of times is not the highest, right? But people do it because that is their passion. That is what they want to do. That's why I did games, because I love games and that was my passion, right? One other thing I wanted to bring up too is that games nowadays doesn't always mean the traditional game that we're thinking about. Games as far as joystick or controller or mouse keyboard or whatever, Overwatch or Fortnite.
Or there's a score at the end or something.
There's a score. AI, simulations, visualizations. These are all other avenues that I touch upon in our program, because I want to let people know that there's other fields out there that, if you like graphics, it's not always graphics could be applied to medical stuff, right? If you like AI, I mean, we don't even have to talk about how big AI is right now, right?
Huge, yeah.
So I'm trying to say broaden the appeal of games to say, or redefine what games are, right?
Right.
But if someone's to go out there, we're typically looking 60 to 70,000 to start for a good developer. It all depends on where you're at. It's hard to really say an exact number. It depends on your skill set, what you're going to do.
Yeah.
No,
I think so. We actually talk a lot about that, of course, in admissions, right?
Yeah.
We have those conversations with family and with incoming students. What I think is interesting about that is, like you said, students can reasonably expect to make anywhere from 60 or 70 when they leave school.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a reasonable expectation.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about that, though, is students can do that in about 3 years here,
Yeah.
as opposed to 4 or 5 or even 6 at other places, right?
Yes.
And so by the time, if a student's going somewhere else, by the time they're hitting their halfway point or at least their 2/3 point,
Yep.
the students here are graduating, and so they've got that much time in industry making money,
Yes.
as opposed to if they were to go somewhere else and maybe try their hand at some sort of other degree.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So as far as you look at these students, you've seen a lot, well, not only over the course of your career, but also while you've been here. What are some just kind of common traits that a good, successful software and game developer student needs to possess? What makes them a good game developer?
Well, I think I just mentioned it. Like the number one thing is you have to have passion for it. That's the type of student I want. I want a student that is passionate about making games, that loves games. I think the best ideas, the best projects come from people that are passionate. If you're not passionate about it, then what are you going to put into your project? What are you going to put into your game, right? So the passion is what's going to drive you through, right? Most people that are in the industry, like I said, with technology, it's not always the highest paying one, but it's the most rewarding for those people that are passionate about that. So passionate. The second one would be smart. And I'm not always talking about like math smart, right? But you have to have a certain amount of logic smart. You have to be able to look at a problem and be able to decompose it into smaller problems. You have to be able to look at things and visualize it in your head of how to solve these problems. And the problems aren't always mathematical. Sometimes it's organization. How do we organize this data, right? And then the last one for me, because I feel like the program is now a very good mixture of the math, the science, and the creativity. So I would say being creative, right? Coming up with ideas, because I think the world is moving to a place where the creative types are going to be the ones that are going to flourish if you have good ideas, right? Sometimes things are solved, mathematical or programming things are solved, or it could be solved elsewhere where it might be cheaper to solve it. But if you are very creative and you come up with good solutions and you're a good person, then you're gonna be in demand, right? But very simple, generic, or things that can be solved by just mathematical things might be able to be solved in cheaper ways or already solved.
Right on.
So you got to bring that creativity to it.
Cool. And that's probably, I think, one of the most important characteristics is someone who's open, right? Mm-hmm. Creative and artistic and has ideas of what would be cool, you know. And I think a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, stuff that's cool in our lives probably have that root in computer science. Right?
Yeah, and I want to be clear too when I say creative. I don't mean like always just drawing, right? But that you're imaginative, right? That you're thinking about outside the box. Creativity comes with a lot of different things. It's because I have people go, oh, I'm not a really good artist. I'm not looking for a good artist, but I want people to think of ideas.
Sure. Awesome. And so one of the things that we encounter quite a bit too are students who have a notion of what they want to do when they come to school, but then they get exposed to a lot of different concepts and ideas, and so that might change while they're here. So how do the different degrees work with each other, in particular during their freshman year, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of exposure do they have to make sure that they really do get set off on the right path?
Yeah, well, what I think is good about Neumont is that the first 3 quarters are kind of spent on, general technology and general education, because you might find, it depends on how far you're in, like if you're, you might be a programmer, you're already, hey, I already know what I want, right? But you might be someone who's just like, oh, I'm not sure, but I know computers are the future because I think computers will be around, right? The 3 months or sorry, the 3/4 gives you a taste of those things. And you can talk to the older students, the other students, and get a taste of what they're doing, right? And you might come in and go, hey, I'm not sure if I like software. Maybe I like hardware more.
Yeah.
Maybe I like more web stuff. So I think that there is you kind of have this time period where you have to you can make that decision. And then once you're in the program, I'm not totally sure, like, what kind of leeway, because we share some classes, and some classes are very specific to that degree. So it depends on how far you're into the program, right?
Well, and I think the goal is by the time they declare their major, which happens at the first part of the sophomore year, by the time they declare that major, hopefully they've been exposed enough to not only their own chosen major, but also the other majors, so that they can confidently say, you know what, this is what I want to do.
Yes, exactly.
This is where I'm going.
And that's why I think it's good that they have that time, because they can see that, right?
Cool. Well, I know we've talked about a lot, and I think we've got just a couple more minutes. But probably one of the most important questions is, what's your favorite game? What do you like to play when you're not teaching?
Oh wow! I should have. I didn't. Did I write that down? No. So it kind of goes back to the whole part where I was talking about, creating or consuming, right? And as a kid, as like a lot of people are, as teenagers and early 20s, you spend a lot of time consuming, right? You just play and stuff. So as an adult with children, I spend most of my time creating things for school, right? So, and I think kind of like music, there's a time period when you kind of get locked, like, oh, who's your favorite band? And it's usually in your early 20s, you have this favorite band. Oh, I love this band, right?
Yep.
I love New Order or whatever. And then you kind of go from there. So for me, like the heyday, the golden era was kind of like the Atari 2600, right?
Yeah.
So there was a game called Adventure. And actually, if you watch Ready Player One, that's the final game they play in that movie, right? So where they're trying to find the Easter egg. And as a kid and technology being new, that was kind of like, you could have games that you think are great now, but ones that are influential. And that would be the influential one for me. It's like a lot of the old Atari 2600, the graphics look primitive, but that was kind of the good thing too, is like you kind of fill your mind in. You look at the box art and that you kind of think about, hey, that's what the game is in my mind as far as, what I perceive it as.
Right on. I think that's cool. I think obviously the sophistication of games has dramatically increased. Right?
Oh yeah.
But it's kind of cool to go back to those favorites that you liked. I remember as a kid, just Pac-Man nonstop.
Yeah.
Right. Nonstop. Or Donkey Kong. So cool.
But I do want to make it clear that I follow every game. I know every game. I watch, I just saw Doom Eternal. I know Fortnite. I have young kids. They all play the games. I am very clued into the industry and what is being done now and the trends and stuff. So I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm some old guy. Oh, I just like the classics. I love all games, right? But
I've got all the answers.
Yeah. But as time goes, I'm more of a viewer. I love to watch games and keep abreast of those things.
You're like the Gandalf without the beard.
Yes.
So right on. And then finally, I think to wrap it up, what are some suggestions where students can go prior to getting into school to learn things like Unity or C#, those kinds of basic skill sets, or at least get them kind of put in the right direction? Where can they go?
Well, Unity is a great program to get started with, and there's a plethora of like stuff out there. You just go on YouTube and say Unity Engine or something like that, and you'll get those things. I would say, to me, there are other, it sounds simple, but there's a program called Scratch, right? And it's just kind of a visual way of kind of creating logic and putting things together. I would say trying to experiment with there's online little game makers and stuff, playing with those. There's also like mods where you can take a game and do mods for modifications to those games and learning those things. So if you have a favorite game, there might be a way that you go in there and mess with the internals of that, right? I would say start to look at games, and this is part of that transformation. Try to look at games as more a analyzing them, evaluate, like looking at a different perspective. Like how are they doing this? How is the game operating here? What are they doing? What do you think the logic is? Like how are they doing health? I always felt like there comes a point when you can never look at it's kind of like a filmmaker or a musician. You can never look at that medium at the same way once you kind of know the internals of
Once
the
you've seen behind the curtain.
Yeah, then you don't look at it the same way. You still can appreciate that, but when I look at games, I look at it kind of like more of like, how did they do that? What are they doing there? So I would say play games, and that's probably not a hard thing, right? But maybe try to look at it a different way. And then also look at maybe Scratch, look at a Unity. There's lots of easy, or not easy, but like simple tutorials that kind of take you through. But you're not going to make anything big, but if you're, one thing leads to another. And if you like what you see, then continue doing that. If you don't, then, you know, you got to kind of make those decisions.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, Ray, thank you again for your time today. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure having you.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully that was informative. And, of course, keep the conversation going after we get out of here. You can always answer questions, or ask questions, rather, and we're always happy to answer them. So thanks again for watching us today. I'm Jason, and this is
Ray,
and we will see you next time. Take care,
See ya,
guys.
thanks.
All right.
And that was the news.
Live at 5.